This is Shir 20 in our series on Avodas Habitachon. In our last Shir, we introduced a fundamental machlokes between the Avodas and the Mitzvah Sharm regarding the true source of our obligation to perform Ishtalis. To recap, according to the Avodas, it's an inherent command and a mitzvah given directly to Adam Rishon before the Chet of the Eitz Hadas. This position is built on the view of certain Rishonim who learn that the verse La'avdai u'Lishamrei, to work it and to guard it, was a physical command to guard and to cultivate Gan Eden, rather than a reference to spiritual service. Therefore, this pre-sin mandate serves as a source for the obligation to do effort. This stands in sharp contrast to the perspective of Mitzvah Sharm, who maintains that the requirement to do ishtalis only applied after the sin of Adam Rishon. In his view, work is a direct result of a curse and the subsequent obligation Hashem placed on mankind. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. However, validating either of these historical sources is a bit complicated, as the primary proof texts face clear challenges within rabbinic literature. The two potential interpretations of La'avdai L'Shamrei brought down by the Rishonim actually reflect an explicit dispute found among different Chazal. For example, in Avodas to Rav Nosson, Perek Yud Aleph, Ois Aleph, it implies that La'avdai L'Shamrei was a literal obligation to perform physical work inside the garden, like Habitachon says. Conversely, it's very clear that the Perek Yud Rav Eliezer, Perek Yud Beis, and the Sifri, that the La'avdai L'Shamrei was an allegorical instruction telling him to learn Torah and perform mitzvahs. If one follows the second tradition, La'avdai L'Shamrei cannot serve as a source for physical labor. Similarly, the textual source used by the Mitzvah Sharm, the curse of B'zei Sapecha, is also not so simple. If you examine the commentary of the Rosh and the Das Zakenim al Torah, they state explicitly that this curse was only directed at people who are Oived HaAdama. They hold that this consequence was only relevant to farmers, meaning the curse would not naturally apply to anyone engaged in other professions, but our understanding is that it applies to all work. Despite these challenges, it is explicitly clear from the text of the Avodas, which is going to be our focus tonight, that he views ishtalis as a definitive mitzvah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Perek Hey, he writes that pursuing a livelihood is avodas haboire, defining it as a service of Hashem. Asher tziva les'asek b'olam le'yeshuvoi u'lezainoi, who commands us to engage in this world for its settlement and its sustenance. The Avodas explains in a separate section exactly why HaKadosh Baruch Hu instituted this command to engage in worldly labor, offering two central reasons. Number one, a spiritual test. It is designed to create a functional test of how we will maintain the laws of the Torah while simultaneously being preoccupied with making a living. This daily pursuit forces us into worldly complications that challenge our commitment to Torah and mitzvahs. It's used as a way to constantly test us. Number two, to safeguard against rebellion. If a person were completely free from the responsibilities of making a living, idleness would drive him towards sin. This is captured by the verse by Yishman, Yeshurun, by Yivot. When Klal Yisrael enjoyed excessive wealth, they sat idle without work, and it ultimately caused them to deny Hashem and to fall into sin. Consequently, the Avodas explains that if an individual reaches a unique spiritual standing where these two underlying reasons for the mitzvah of ishtalis no longer applied to him, Hashem will completely liberate him from the physical grind of work. This exceptional exemption applies to someone who meets the following spiritual criteria. He entirely prioritizes avodas elikim, the service of Hashem, and consistently is boicher briyasa, choosing the fear of Hashem. He relies completely on Hashem across all domains, understanding Him as the source of both ruchnius, spirituality, and gashmius, materiality. He has successfully removed all negative midas from himself and generally aspires to build positive traits. He is anchored in a state of spiritual stability where living in comfort and tranquility will never cause him to reject Hashem or weaken his avodas Hashem. The Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, can no longer incite him, leaving him entirely not tempted by the superficial pleasures of this world. When a person achieves this level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu frees him from the physical toil of work and the need to rely on various worldly intermediaries to secure his livelihood. Because he no longer requires the baseline tests or boundaries associated with standard labor, his sustenance comes directly to him without painful struggle or any exhausting labor. He receives exactly the allocation he requires to meet his practical needs. The Chovos HaLevavos notes that the precise scenario is what is described by the verse, Lo Yariv Hashem Nefesh Tzaddik. Hashem will not allow the soul of the righteous to famish. The Chovos HaLevavos reinforces his perspective on Ishtalos, which is that it's a command and a mitzvah. Further in Shar Avodas Hakim Parak Daled, dictating that any action required to secure raw sustenance is a commandment duty. He traces this to the creation of man in Bereshis, Parak Aleph, Pasuk Chaf Ches, Peru Revu Malei Haaretz Kivshuha. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and conquer it. He then highlights the very next verse, which records Hashem saying, Ezev Zairea Zera Asher Al Panei Kol Haaretz, herb yielding seed which is upon the face of all the earth. From this textual framing, the Chovos HaLevavos demonstrates that all processing actions that secure food are explicitly included within the original commandment. This baseline stance is mirrored by the later codifiers as well, in the Sefer Yad HaKtano, within Shar Tes, Darkei Hashgacha, Perek Tes, Sif Ches and Tes. The author explicitly writes that we are obligated to engage in the Ishtalos purely because it's a mitzvah. He adds that while our real-world actions do not possess any independent power to create or guarantee a financial result, we perform them exclusively l'kayem mitzvoso yisbarach, to fulfill the commandment of His blessed name. By engaging in labor, we are simply fulfilling the directive issued by Ribbono Shel Olam at the very start of creation to be oiskei ve'iskei Olam al seder habriya, engage in the affairs of the world according to the natural order.